Welcome to Liberatory Love. In this video, I'm going to give you an overview of how to read a gene key profile. With that, I want to acknowledge that I am relatively new into my exploration in the gene keys. I've been here about 6 months, but it's encouraged within this system to be here about 2 years before you begin to work with others. So I'm going to just speak briefly to my background, how I've already seen this play out and why I'm speaking to it, and then acknowledge that I'm on this path learning alongside others. From my understanding, the gene key system has only been a public kind of source of transmission or knowledge since the early 2000s. So we're looking at about 20 years. So there's not so many people who maybe have heard of it. More people have heard of the system of human design, which came out at the end of the 80s. And both of these systems draw on things like the Kabbalah from Judaism, astrology, the I Ching from ancient China, and different systems that look at the body as a source of understanding and knowledge, as well as the body's relationship to the planetary systems and this concept really of divine timing. While I'm not someone who's super into astrology, so I can't really speak to how all of these things work, I'm someone who has been impacted through readings from human design and gene keys that have helped shift my life. And so that's the lens with which I come at this. Initially in 2021, someone did a reading for me at a time when I was going through an extraordinary amount of grief. And this reading was so in-depth and so detailed and so relevant that I had this person do a reading also for my brother who had already passed away. The things said were also so deeply relevant. I forgot about these things and came back to them this year, 3 years later, because I began to undergo some changes where different ideas and thoughts from those readings came back to me and I wanted to explore more. This time when I came back, I was able to sit and I read 250 pages of a book straight over the course of a weekend. That's how enticing it was to me. I then began to study something called the Golden Path, which is really the foundation for a personal journey within the Gene Keys. But what I love most about the Gene Keys is that it's about our collective growth, our collective evolution, and as Richard Rudd, the founder of the Gene Key system, says, our involution as well, our inner and our outer journey. So let's get to reading a profile. Right now, the Gene Keys website just created a beautiful new profile that you can learn about. As someone who is learning on the old profile, I can genuinely say this is so, so beautiful. And I want to say the profile that I'm using here today is not my own, but it is of a historical figure who I love. So I invite you to, on this system, you can look up your own profile and you can look up others. And I invite you to do your own and do a historical figure who you love. If you know their birthday, if you don't know their time of birth, you can still put in noon, and this should give you a pretty close estimate. So this figure is a figure from the Baha'i faith. So if you're Baha'i watching this video, I know that it could feel a little strange. It's like someone from the Christian faith watching a video of someone read the profile of Jesus. Abdullah is not the center of the faith, but he's seen as someone who has lived out the Baha'i faith. But I really think this profile is a beautiful expression and testament of his life as well. So the thing that I want to bring attention to is that when you open up a profile, after you put in your birth details, you'll get a profile like this. There's going to be 4 different ways that you can view the profile. One is to see all 11 spheres or circles in this profile. Another is to see just one path. This green path is called your activation sequence. Another is to see just this red path called your Venus sequence about heart opening. And another is to see this blue path called your Pearl sequence, which is about prosperity. And aside from seeing these 3 different or 4 different sequences, it's 3 sequences, but one of them is all of them together. Another thing that you can do is click on this settings button and actually look at remove information from here. But if you don't know what any of these words mean, you're not going to know what you want to remove. So what I would offer for you is to look at the sphere, the gene key. For now, remove the line number because that's an added layer of complexity. And we'll keep everything else. If you want to get rid of that ring, you can. If you like astrology, you can also add in that. And what you can also do is take away these different shadows, gifts, and cities. For today, we're going to keep all 3. So The heart of the gene keys, from my current understanding, is looking at these 64 archetypes, these 64 numbers that have representations based in the Chinese I Ching. Each number, each 64 archetype has a resonance with something in nature. So the initial gene key system involved, or I Ching system, it looks like this. You might have seen the yin yang symbol already. And then there's 8 different hexagrams or combinations of lines that represent the elements. So straight lines represent yang or more masculine energy, and split lines represent yin or more feminine energy. And the original I Ching from ancient China has 8 different hexagrams or versions of these combinations of yin and yang that represent the different elements. And when you combine each of those 8 different expressions with each other, I know I said I was going to read the profile, but I just want to geek out about this for a minute. When you get each of these 8 different expressions and you pair them together, then what you get is 64 different archetypes, which look like this. So when we look at your profile, we're looking at 11, but you can see here that all 64 archetypes are a combination of different elements of nature. So they all have different balances of feminine and masculine, and they all have different balances of, yeah, I guess that kind of summarizes it. Yin and yang, feminine and masculine. There's 64 different ways that can look. The last thing that I want to say is that when we're looking at the 11 spheres that show up in your profile, the first one that we're looking at is going to look like so. And these first 4, which are considered your genius, what you're here to express and bring to the world, they come about from the time you are born. And so I'm going to bring up one more image here. So this symbol, this imagery shows a calendar, a circular calendar rather than a calendar that's more linear. And this circular calendar implies that throughout the year, they're based upon where the planets are, that different elements are more predominant than others. And so the moment that you are born pulls a gene key. So for me, I'll just give an example that for me, born in August, it pulls the gene key 4. And then this becomes the thing that you are here to work on and the thing that you are here to grow at. And that is the thing directly across the circle, which for me is 49. At the same time, you have your radiance, what brings you health, and what is bringing you greater purpose. And those are seen to be the cross section. So whereas 4 and 49 are what I'm here to work and grow at, my cross section, what I'm here to really blossom into, is the exact cross section of that on this circle, which is 43 and 23, which you can see here and here. So the way that you see it on this profile, though, is not on that graph. It will look like this. And let's just see if we can add in the pathways here. Yeah, okay. So within this first look, these 4 gene keys are going to be the ones that you're going to focus on for a while. It's recommended that you actually take 1 key for a month. So since there's 11 keys in your profile, this would be really a year-long journey, or 11 months, 1 key per month. That being said, these 4 alone, just starting to meditate on them, will start to open up your life. And the whole thing of the gene keys is the art of contemplation. So you're not here to solve or fix. You're here to look at these and let them begin to speak to you. And your life's work, the first one, again, is going to be, what's beautiful about this profiler is you can actually click on it and it will actually tell you a little bit about what it is you're here to do. That's what life's work is about. And then the three things that you're always going to get is the shadow, how it shows, how this pain point of suffering shows up in your life, and then which is like the mud, and then the gift from that shadow, which is like the lotus coming from the mud, and then the siddhi, which is a Sanskrit word for the spiritual essence, which will show more of the gift that's going to naturally come when you start focusing on that gift. And a really beautiful thing about the Gene Keys is that its emphasis is on allowing, accepting, and embracing the shadow. So you're not at war with yourself. You're actually embracing that these states of suffering are a part of your human experience, and they're also part of our collective human experience. The most helpful thing on this profiler, as someone who's done a lot of reading of the Gene Key books, I can say the audios are extremely powerful, and the audio kit for this is a separate price. So the fact that they just put all these online for free is very beautiful. Just listening to one of those audios in the morning or in the evening can be very opening. Within this single audio, you'll get a description of the shadow, a description of the gift within this, and a description of the spiritual essence, and also a larger image, because again, all of us contain all of these. Just from looking at that circular graph, you can see how these are actually happening all throughout the year. So there's different times where these energies are more in the air, and these also might help you understand other people around you as well. So moving from the path here is your life's work, what it is you're here to do. And then getting from that space into your evolution, that thing across the circle, which is what you're here to learn. And again, you're going to get this overview. You're going to read about the shadow, read about the gift, and read about the larger essence coming through. The other thing that's going to be in here is your line. And the line the Gene Keys says is similar to how there's different notes on a piano. I like to also think of, I'm still learning about this, but I like to really think about how you can play a C note over here, you can play a C note over here, and it's going to have a different sound to it. But I think the way that it's kind of illustrated here, I think of it more like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, which is to say that it's all music, but there's different ways in which we can harmonize. So within the Gene Key system, there's 64 archetypes, but there's 6 lines. So me and you both might have 34 strength, the gift of strength in our profile, but me as a line 1, who is all about getting things started and creating, I might be here to really be that starter activator force, and you as a line 6, which is all about completion and wholeness and teaching, you might have a different way of working with that key. So that's what the line is going to give you. But I would say the lines are just a more, again, a type of expression, and there's still so much room there. One other thing is that the Gene Key system is all about consciousness. So when you're looking at this, it's not to lock you in, but it's to actually alert you to ways that involution, inner growth, and evolution, outer growth can take place. So this challenge, this first line is really going to take you through some deep challenge. Then you will be initiated onto the path of breakthrough. And there's a larger course to really go into all this. I'm just giving you an overview. Looking at your profile, you're not going to, of course, be understanding these paths, but what you're going to start to see and feel is maybe how this shows up. So in this case, when this human, Abdul came from his life's work of presence, of self-assurance and strength, and these gifts of presence and majesty, then he can move into this larger radiance, this thing that is here to bring health, which is freedom from victimization. And again, you can read the shadow, the gifts, and from there, we move into our purpose. And purpose is not about what we're doing, but what we're here to be in the world. It's what deeply fulfills us no matter what we're doing. It's not just about our job or anything like that. And this is the purpose of, in this case, moving from dishonesty to intimacy to transparency. What's very fun about looking at historical figures in here too is you can, in this case, Abdullah is someone who really lived in this spiritual essence and, was actually known for bringing freedom and transparency places. But For example, I've done this with a person in my life who's passed, and one of their keys was about sacrifice. And it's interesting to really look at yourself. The whole Gene Key system is about compassion, but it's really interesting to consider like how this person engaged, how you've witnessed their shadow and their light and their gift at the same time. And to have compassion that we are all, no one is free of this. All of us are growing. So just as a starting place, these are the 4 keys that are really going to start to open you up to more of yourself. And as an example for myself, my 4 involve simplicity and complexity and insight and epiphany. And this, as someone who's worked on coaching and creativity, this is the exact feedback I used to always get from people, that I was making things clear, that I was helping them see, that I was bringing these aha moments. And so for me, reading those was like, it felt like putting on the right outfit. So just notice how they feel for you. And again, focus on some of the short descriptions as well as on the audio. There's a couple things on here, which is you can actually visit the online library as well, where they're going to talk a little bit more about the astrology and some of the deeper pieces of the gene keys. And then there's also something in the gene key system called the dream arc, where different animals are brought in to help us think about the different archetypes as they're expressed in nature. That this can be really, really beautiful. One of the most beautiful things about the gene keys is that it's connecting us more and more into patterns that are happening in nature, patterns that are happening on the earth. So if you're already oriented toward animals, this can be very fun to explore. But I would say for now, just sticking to the audio. So the second thing is the path, the Venus path, which is the path of love. And again, in this path, this is a whole separate course online. There's even a retreat going on right now that is 6 months long. I chose not to do it yet because of the level of intensity that this path already has for me. Just from reading the book and studying it for myself, I was having incredibly deep dreams, and I'm moving through so much right now that I really knew for myself there's a deeper level of support I need to have around me. But that's just to say how activating this experience can be. The basic that you want to know about the Venus sequence is that this is about your heart opening. So what I love so much about the Gene Keys is that it's encouraging us and supporting us to have a more holistic life. If you were raised in the West, or especially in the US, you were raised with a high cultural value of attainment, material success, ego, putting on a show, demonstrating. And for me as a coach who works with people on embodiment and coming into greater wholeness and greater truth, I'm working all the time with helping someone come into wholeness while also staying in question of our social values, so that we don't just come into wholeness and then jump right back into a culture that is all ego-centered and attainment-centered. And to me, the Gene Keys creates a very, very holistic vision for us, where we're tapped into our genius, we're opening up our hearts, and we're living through service, and we're doing these things not just focused on the outer attainment of a spouse or this XYZ type of job, but they're really thinking deeply and opening deeply to who we can be in relationships. So the Venus path is about starting to see how we show up in relationship. And I love this as well as a relationship coach, because one of the focuses in relationship coaching is helping and supporting people to see their role in their relationships. And this can be really, really challenging, given that we are carrying so much baggage with us. And the Gene Keys is asking us to open up to a process of continuous transformation that we are consciously engaged in. And so the Venus sequence gives you some language and a path to actually see your heart opening. The first circle again, starts with your purpose, but now this time you're looking at it in terms of your purpose in relationship. This then leads to your attraction. And again, you can read a little bit about what this means. And each of the shadows to light, the attraction is, excuse me, what is magnetizing you a bit more toward others, but it has more to do with our sexual attraction. And then the following 3 keys has to do with our relationships, via childhood. So the IQ has to do with how our intellect, how we are cognitively, mentally thinking about and connecting in relationship. And that was largely developed at ages. The gene key looks at our development over 7-year period, so the ages of 15 through 21. The EQ looks at our emotional intelligence developed more from the ages of 8 through 14, and the SQ is more about our spiritual intelligence from the time we were a baby until we were age 7. And the core is about the time from 0 to 9 months that we were just a child already being imprinted upon. Again, the gene keys asks us to stay in consciousness and conscious engagement with our growth. So none of these are here to say this is who you are or who you'll always be. It's more to acknowledge that we have been impacted and to awaken us to a deeper heartfelt intelligence that involves working with our mind first, because this is the easiest place to access, but recognizing that the mind is actually built upon our emotions. And so if we want to shift our mind, we actually have to shift our heart. And our heart is based on a deeper physical sensation. Spirituality is not just something out there, but it's the deeply, deeply physical part of our being. And so we want to actually start to liberate our body. And the whole focus of the Gene Keys is about embodiment. And when we go down this path of exploring more of our past that we're coming into, our purpose, what we're holding on to, the deeper intelligence that can come from opening our heart, the love that we can be, and the realization and knowing that comes from really being with our core stability. Our core wound is also the place where our core stability is. So much more can open up to us. It is then from this place of love that we can open into prosperity. And prosperity is not just about centering on wealth, but it is about centering on service, what we are here to do. So now the same thing that was our core wound, that was our core struggle in relationship, which became our core gift, is now the thing that becomes what we're here to, our vocation, what we're here to give into the world. Our culture is about what kind of the energy we're bringing to our collective, and our brand is who we uniquely are, how we relate with others in the process. And our pearl at the center here, and you can also see these paths again. In this case, these paths are not moving up or moving in. They're actually creating a foundation, a framework for a deeper pearl to come forth, just like the pearl comes from the oyster. The brand, vocation, and culture, these three, which if you notice, your brand again is your life's work now being used in service to others. These three things are forming a foundation so that this deeper essence, the pearl, can come through. And the pearl is like the gift of what you're here to give. And if you know of the person of Abdu'l-Baha who lived in service, the name Abdu'l-Baha means servant. Acceptance and universal love is actually at the center of his. But if you are born around May 23rd, this also is likely going to be in your chart, because we see that throughout the year, these energies are coming into the earth. So as you can see, this is something that could take you 11 months. It could take you 2 years, as the Gene Key system recommends. And it can also take you 11 weeks if you were to work with me on some of the ways you can creatively start to bring this into the other things that you're doing in your life. But overall, this is a little map of starting to have a life with more fullness, with more ease, with more connection to prosperity as service, and with more heart opening. I would love to know for you, what's your favorite part to explore on this profile and how it has begun to impact your life. And finally, I'm an embodiment coach. So for me, I focus on helping people unlock and open within their own knowing. If that's of interest to you, you can work with me. And I subtly am integrating Gene Key work with those who want into their journey. And one last thing here is if you just want to study just a part of this, you can also do that. You can take away everything. You can just look at the names of the spheres. You can just look at what line you are, which I again mentioned is a little bit more complex. You can just look at your shadows and really see how that's been present in your life. You can just look at the gift that's coming through. You can just look at the spiritual essence. If you only remember one thing, this is a space to contemplate, to come into greater self-love and acceptance, and ultimately to become a deeper version of who you are, not by avoiding or fighting against your shadows, but allowing, accepting, and embracing them. And this is ultimately lifelong work. It is not meant to just be done in a short amount of time, but really to open you up into a richer and more whole experience of who you are.